let's talk about the functions. So we've been using some functions so far, like int to convert the integer strings to an integer, or to convert integer to a float using float, or convert anything into a string using str_string. So what is a function? It is a string. It is a sequence of code which performs a specific task. Functions often take arguments, but not always. Arguments are the input of a function, and it often returns a value, but not always. Returns a value is like an output. So there can be two kinds of outputs of a function. You have some inputs or not, and the output can be a behavior, can be something that the functions do, but maybe some value. For example, if you don't return a value, you can ask the function to do something. For example, when I input 3 and 3, then you print out a lot of 3s. And when I input 3 and 5, you print out a lot of 5. You always print the larger numbers, but you don't really return anything. If you define, for example, a equals this function of something, then a will not be assigned any value out of this function after you input the arguments or the inputs. Or a function cannot just output some behavior, but also some value. For example, you can have a function where you have the input of x and y, and it always returns you a value of x multiplies y. Like if you enter 3 and 3, then it outputs 9, and if you enter 3 and 5, it returns 15. So how do you create new functions? It has some specific syntax. Okay, some functions, well, actually a lot of functions, they are already in the Python libraries. For example, the int, the integer, float, string, they're already there. But you can also design your own functions, and we can have functions that do almost anything. Okay. Why do we use them? Because it often makes our code easier to read, and also let's repeat the code more efficiently. For example, if you want the program to do something once, then twice, then for 100 times, then why not just write a function when you have the inputs and it returns the output? Then you can just use this simple function that contains maybe like dozens of lines of codes. They just repeatedly use this function rather than repeating these lines for 100 times. That can be more efficient. Okay. The syntax of creating a new function is def, the function name, and the arguments. Okay, for example, if you want to define a function called print name that takes in a string, then the username is a string, and print name, maybe the function's statement is just print this username. Okay, it doesn't return the value. Or you can probably return the length of this string. You can return the length of the string. Like with if, elif, else, and while blocks, or these kind of things that we learned before, indentation is very important. Okay, the function is a code intended immediately following the function definition. Take a look at the function here. Get final answer. This is the function name, and file name is the argument or the input. Sometimes I call it a parameter. Can be fine. And here is a comment. The comment is a comment, not just a string, because it has 3 quotations. Okay. If you just have a single or 2 quotations, then it's a string. But here you have 3 quotations and not 2 quotations. A single quotation and double quotation, but just 1 pair of quotation. Here we have 3 pairs of quotations. then it's a comment. It usually says like what this function is about. Then you have line 1, line 2, different statements, and basically you are using this find name, which is a argument, to do a lot of things. Then you return a final calculated value. You do not have to always have the return here. You don't have to return a value. You can just ask the function to do something. For example, you can ask it to print out a lot of things. Okay. Let's create a very simple function that is print word. It doesn't have any argument. It doesn't have to return a value. It just does something. Print computer size. Okay, it's a course name. How do you do it? I define a function print name. Just to print something. Okay. I just want to print something. And I just print good morning. Or now it's afternoon, but whatever. Then you have defined a function. Why is my computer dead? Okay, it's fine. Now I wanna print something. If you do it, it's gonna what's going on here? What if it returns 5? Now x equals print something. X is 5. Okay. If I just do this, strange. Maybe I want to do it again. Oh, I'm sorry. The mistake was that I forgot to include the parentheses. If you have the parentheses, it's going to be good morning. Okay, if you don't have it, it's going to just say, okay, this is a function. Sorry, I forgot this. And see, I can make bugs. Just when I was teaching, sometimes I ignore the details. Okay. To call this function, we simply use its name. Don't forget the parentheses. Even though this function doesn't really have arguments, the parameters, the inputs, you still have to have the parentheses after the function name. You can change these print word function by giving it a argument, and you print out the argument. For example, print something. Let me define the print something as print something phrase. Okay, phrase is a parameter. Good morning, or maybe name. Name. Good morning plus name. Okay. Say now, if I just do here this, it's gonna say, hey, this function is missing a required positional argument, name. So I have to have a name. Give a name here, like Frankie. Okay. So it will print out, good morning, Frankie. Okay, good morning, Frankie. And if I want to use this one again, and I just to say, hey, then it's going to print something else. So the input is the name here. The output is a behavior. The function does something for you. But you don't really have a returned value. For example, if I have x equals then x is nothing. Okay, it doesn't return anything to x. But if I change this a little bit, say I redefine this function, so it's going to override the previously defined functions with the same thing. Then I can just do return the length of name. And if I have x equals Zigan and good morning Zigan and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So x should be 5. X is 5. If I do Frankie, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So x should be 7. Okay. So this is about passing values into functions. So the function takes arguments. When we call this function, whatever value we put inside this parenthesis, parenthesis, is a value the function uses. Okay, this is also not about the return, but and this is about the multiple argument. You don't have to just have one argument. You can have multiple arguments. For example, if I redefine this as name 1 and name 2, and good morning name 1 and plus good morning name 2. Then we return a tuple of those name 1 and name 2. Okay. Now, if we just have print, it's gonna have good morning Ziga, good morning Frankie. Okay, and it will return a tuple with the first element Ziga and the next one Frankie. Okay. We also have we can also, when we define the function, we can also make the default value, like okay. Now I did redefine the print something. If I just enter this, it's going to be the same. But if I now enter Zigan here, I should leave it blank. Yeah, the default ones have to be before the not the if I just enter Frankie, then Frankie will be used for name 1, and because I haven't defined I haven't assigned the value to name 2, the name 2 will be given the default value of Alice. If I put nothing into this function, then it's gonna use both the default value. Okay, good morning Jane, good morning Alice, and it's gonna return the length of Jane, which is 4, and the length of Alice, which is 5. Let's go to the fancy math. So fancy math has two arguments, a and b, and you do some calculation within this function. This function calculates c according to this formula of a and b. Then you print out c. Okay, remember that it doesn't return a c. So if you define x equals fancy math 5, 6, then x will not have any value, but it's going to do something to print out c. Okay. So this is an in-class test. You should pause this video and use the fancy math to try the fancy math with you for yourself. I have to remind you that because when I'm recording this teaching video, I can be recording it pretty fast. And for every 15 minutes video, I expect you to use 45 minutes because half an hour is your practice time. And if a video has like half an hour, it's usually a 1.5 hour class for face-to-face teaching, because in the class usually I would have like say 1 hour for you to practice this, and I will just stay there and see how you code and debug your bugs, debug your codes, and you can't really learn how to code if you just when you just finish watching my video. You have to practice every single one of the practice that I'm doing here. Even for this fancy math, I'm not doing this in Spider by myself. You have to do this because during the class, even I'm not doing it, I would require you to do it. Okay, so you should pause this video and do it by yourself. Okay, I'll assume that you have already done this. So let's go. Let's continue. So return values. Like I said, you can use the return keyword to return any type of output that you want the function to return. You can return numbers, strings, and any values stored in the variables. For example, lists, tuples, dictionaries. You can return anything you want. Okay, here you use a fancy math and you calculate c according to your input argument a and b. Then you return c. Say we have defining a fancy math a and b. Remember there is a column here, and c is equal to, let's just do something like a to the power of b. Okay, then I will just return c, and I have x equals fancy math 2 to the power of 4. Then x should be 16. Okay, you don't have to just return 1. You can return it, which is a tuple, and x will be a tuple of 16, 2, and 4. Remember to pause this video and practice by yourself, not just watching me. Just watch me through this, and even though you can perfectly understand how I code, you could get numerous bugs when you code. Just a kind reminder. Okay, you can also assign, well, this is kind of like an x equals fancy math something. Okay, it's going to return a value. You can also print these fancy math. Basically, you're printing the fancy number. It's going to print out the return value. If a function returns a value, we can use it as an argument for another function. Okay. Like this. How do I illustrate it? For example, this is a fancy math, right? Let me define another fancy tuple. let's just say my input is a tuple and another tuple. And I return the value of tuple 1, the length of tuple 1 to the power of length tuple 2. Okay, this is my fancy tuple. I can just define the result as the fancy tuple okay. Then I will have tuple 1 and tuple 2. I'll just have fancy math. Remember that fancy math will output a tuple, right? 2 and 3. And then I have fancy math 4 and 5. Okay, then I enter result. Result must be 27 because fancy math will return you this tuple and fancy math will return you this tuple. And you see both of them have 3 elements. So the length of this is 3, the length of this is 3. So the result is 3 to the power of 3, which is 27. Default values for arguments. Okay, can define the function, and with the argument you can use the equal sign, assign the default value to this parameter, to this argument. So let's do it. What if I can do this? Maybe. Okay, this is a function, and if you have function 5, 3, and hello, let's do 5, 2, hello. Let's do 5 to hey. Okay, it's going to return you 7 because it's just 5 plus 2. If you do 5, 2, because the third D, this argument is never used in calculating the return value. So here, my fun 5, 2 is also 7, and if I do my fun just 5, then B will be given the number, will be assigned 5, but C, although we haven't specified the value of C, C will take the default value of 3. So we expect that the return value should be 5 plus 3, which is 8. Okay, 8. And yeah, that's it. And what if you just do this? It's gonna give you an error, I expect, because the first argument B must take some value because it doesn't have a default value. See, it says like my function is missing one required positional argument B. Keyword arguments. You can call a function with some or all of this argument out of order, as long as you can specify their names. Yes, sorry, my brain was blank. Here, you can actually just So if I have this, it's gonna print out. It's gonna assign Jane to name 1 and Alice to name 2. If I only input one argument, it's gonna give this argument to name 1, and name 2 will take Alice. If I just want to give this value to name 2, I should use name 2. So it's gonna give the name 1 the default value. Sorry, I was blank at that time. Yeah, sometimes you can also write the return function. If the function is really short, you can put them into one line, but I don't suggest you to do this. I suggest you still use the indentation. And yes, you can also use different orders as long as you you specify which argument you want this value to be assigned to. Here you only switch the order of y and z because the first one is default as x, so we know that x is -2 and the z will be -4 and y is -3. They can also be combined with defaults too. Okay, so if you just don't enter anything, you don't have any input, then all of these arguments will take their default value. And if you just assign 100 to z, then 1 and 2 will be assigned to, the default value will be assigned to x and y. Okay, that's the very simple introduction of the functions. Please practice all of these functions that I have guided you through. But also remember that we also have the W3 resource practice to make. Just do more practice and make yourself familiar with this. And the next video we will talk about the functional programming.